The Memphis Grizzlies won their seventh consecutive game, 121-13 against the San Antonio Spurs, but they're missing a couple guys. Ja Morant's hurt right now. Brandon Clarke's hurt right now. The rotation is being wiggled a little bit. We're going to tell you why. We have some good news coming on that front, and the Grizzlies have more good news coming. Coming up right here, right now, on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. And once again, we appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. My co-host, Joe Mullinax, is not here today. First and foremost, we thank you for tuning in again to Locked On Grizzlies on today. And make sure you know that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Remember, first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code LOCKED ON. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com and use the promo code LOCKED ON. The Grizzlies are pretty locked on to the assignment right now. I mean, 7 consecutive wins, NBA high 7-game winning streak right now, the longest active winning streak in the NBA. And granted, the competition hasn't been the greatest, but you play what's on your schedule and you take advantage of those opportunities to win some games. And that's what the Grizzlies are doing right now. They're dominating this schedule, and the latest game came against San Antonio Spurs, second night of a back-to-back. The Spurs gave them all they could handle, but the Grizzlies won 121-113 in this game. But we're going to talk about the game. We're going to break down the game. We're going to talk about the big night from Tyus Jones, Jaren Jackson Jr., another game with 5 blocks, Defensive Player of the Year. We're going to talk about all that stuff later, but we got to talk about some before the game stuff first, because we played a long game here on Locked On Grizzlies, and I know you Grizzlies fans, you're playing the long game as well. You want to know how healthy can this team be, over the course of the season, because the name of the game is to be the healthiest team in the playoffs and be the best, playing your best basketball at that time of the year as well. So here's the case with the Grizzlies. Ja Morant did not play for the second consecutive game. Brandon Clarke missed his 5th consecutive game. Right thigh soreness for Ja Morant, left hip soreness for Brandon Clarke. Talked to Taylor Jenkins, about both of these guys recently, and I think both you have positive updates to different degrees. Ja Morant, it sounds like he's much closer to being back. As we know, the Grizzlies will return to play on Wednesday against the San Antonio Spurs before getting 2 more days off and going on the road and playing against the Indiana Pacers. So Ja Morant sounds like he's a little bit closer with the right thigh soreness. In fact, I saw him warm up before the game in his normal warm-up window. He usually warms up about, I'd say, in that 90-minute range, 90 to 75-minute range before game time. And he was out there, even though he was declared out ahead of the game against the San Antonio Spurs. He was out there going through his regular warm-ups. He was moving around pretty good, I would say. And you can tell he's getting real close. So with Ja Morant, I think he's a little bit closer. Whereas to Brandon Clarke, probably won't be back this week. Taylor Jenkins kind of alluded to him doing some smaller things right now, some one-on-one basketball stuff and some small group playing group stuff, as Taylor Jenkins like to call it. So with Brandon Clarke, it seems that he at this point is looking at a possible return next week. So there's a good chance that Brandon Clarke will be unavailable for the next couple of games, and he'll be back next week, possibly MLK Day, or going into the West Coast road trip, which is going to be a big road trip, to say the least. So it'll be good to have Brandon Clarke back. And now we have a clear indication of, some injury things. How is it impacting the rotation? Well, for one, there's Xavier Tillman. Xavier Tillman is the main guy right now who is taking advantage of increased opportunity. I saw him a couple days ago, after Xavier Tillman got the start, right? And And, I was waiting on him to come to the locker room. Grizzlies players, they come to the locker room at different points, after a game. And with Xavier Tillman Sr., he was one of the last players to come into the locker room after the win against the Utah Jazz, where he played close to 33 minutes. And, I was waiting on him, and I was like, man, kind of took you a while to get here. And he was, joking about, his body was reacting to the fact that he had to play more than 32 minutes in that game. And then he turns around on the second night of a back-to-back and plays 17 minutes. So Xavier Tillman, if you look at his last 4 games, this is the stretch of games where he's played more than 15 minutes in each of these games, in the last 4 games. Remember, Brandon Clarke has been out for the last 5, but the last 4 in particular, 10 points and 6 rebounds in one, 6 points, 8 rebounds in the next, 9 points, 9 rebounds in the start on Sunday, and then 9 points and 7 boards in the win against the Spurs. Xavier Tillman is clearly making an impact. For a while, I was wondering what can his role be on this team? Is he one of those guys where you say you don't know what his role will be going forward? But I feel like he's a great, or I would say a really solid big man to have step in the case of, an injury to Steven Adams or an injury to Brandon Clarke, like in this case. So you can say, hey, let him fill in. His mobility stands out, for a guy his size. He moves really well. He's kind of making something out of that mid-range, that little floater push shot that he has inside of the mid-range line in that restricted area part of the court. He's kind of made that his go-to shot. And most of you probably didn't know this, but we're going to hit you with a Locked On Grizzlies fun fact right here. Xavier Tillman recently was very, very, very close to breaking the Grizzlies record for consecutive field goals made. He had 14 consecutive made shots over a stretch. And the stretch, now, as you may probably have wondered, it was a bunch of, 3 for 3, 1 for 1 in a couple games, 4 for 4, and he went 1 for 1 in the next game. But he made 5 out of 6 against the Atlanta Hawks. And then after that, against the Bucks, 3 for 3, 1 for 1 against the Nuggets, 1 for 1 against the Suns. Then he didn't play against the Warriors on Christmas. Next game against the Suns, went 4 for 4, went 1 for 1 against the Pelicans. And then the streak ended against the Kings when he went 2 for 4. So just wanted to point that out to highlight the efficiency that he's playing at right now, combined with his forcefulness on the boards, right? He's rebounding the ball at a high level. He's a guy who's pretty active, in these games. And I've always said that Xavier Tillman is a solid rebounder. But when you factor in, again, going back to the last 4 games, 3 offensive rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds, 4 offensive rebounds, 2 offensive rebounds in those last 4 games. So, I mean, you already got to deal with Steven Adams on the board. Imagine when he goes out, then you have this guy coming in limited time, making this type of impact on the glass. So, Xavier Tillman, if you talk about the long game, right, in terms of health, the long game here with the way he's playing is you can look at it 2 ways. It can be reassurance in terms of, yes, we have a third big man who in case of, an injury or something, who was able to step in and be productive. Or you could be one of those people who say, look, you're not going to trade the first-round picks. You're not going to trade Zaire Williams. You're not going to trade Dylan Brooks. You're not going to trade any of the starters. John Conchar just got an extension. That makes him one of possibly 2 players. Xavier Tillman and Danny Green are possibly your only expendable players on this roster. And someone may say, hey, his trade value is going up. So it's 2 ways to look at it. I'm more in the assurance perspective here of the fact that, hey, you have a third big man in case of injuries, because injuries are a part of the game. Injuries do happen, who can step in, not for a long period of time in the playoffs or something, but just, hey, Brandon Clarke needs a couple days off. Steven Adams needs a couple days off. Oh, no sweat. You got Xavier Tillman, the senior, ready to step in. So I think that was just something to point out as well with the Grizzlies in this game. And another thing I want to point out to you is make sure you are taking advantage of the opportunity that we have at Prospects. But before I get to that, I just want to mention that coming up next, we're going to talk about an interesting matchup from this Spurs and Grizzlies game. And Dad, is Tyus Jones versus Tre Jones. We've seen it a couple times, right? We've seen them go against each other, but this was the first game that Tyus Jones and Tre Jones started against one another. We'll talk about that coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, again, make sure that you are tuned in to Prize Picks, because remember, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. And remember, Prize Picks is where you can go to get a 100% deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com. And all you got to do is type in the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKED, Locked On. And the thing about Prize Picks is all you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players. Pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than your Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Up to 25 times. That's a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen. And remember, with Prize Picks, you're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections. And then Prize Picks, you have offer projections on any sport that you watch. NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. College football is over now, but maybe some of you took advantage of the Prize Pick opportunities over there. Congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs as well for winning a 65-7 blowout game in the national championship. But women's college basketball, soccer, other places as well, like esports, NASCAR, tennis, Prize Picks is everywhere. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. And don't forget, they're safe and fast withdrawals. All you have to do is go over to prizepicks.com. Use the promo code Locked On to take advantage of this great opportunity. The Grizzlies had a great opportunity on this game against the Spurs. And you know who else had a great opportunity? The Jones family. The Jones family got the opportunity to see Tyus Jones and Tre Jones not just come off the bench and play 5-10 minutes against each other. Both guys started, and both guys had really good nights. I mean, Tre Jones, 18.7 assists. I joked with Tyus after the game about how Tre Jones in the fourth quarter, you know what he did? He pulled his brother's move on him. He did a nice little floater shot that had Tyus Jones, flying in the air past him, and he pushed the floater and made it over the Grizzlies defense. I said, Tyus, he did your move on you. But in the end, of course, how these teams tend to play out, Big Brother got the last word. Tyus Jones, 24 points, 6 assists in this game, 3 steals as well. So all I have to point out, with Tyus Jones right now, the Grizzlies we talked about it. He's one of the more stable guys in the NBA at what he does. Comes in, starts games, and is automatically productive. But what we saw in this game from Tyus Jones was he was one of the main guys who in the fourth quarter stepped up, kind of took over the game for the Grizzlies and helped them get over the edge, because the Spurs took an early lead in that fourth quarter. And, Taylor Jenkins called timeout. Next thing you know, you see Tyus Jones creeping up to the scorer's table earlier in the fourth quarter, and then Taylor Jenkins probably would have wanted to get him in. But in the end, it worked out, and I think Tyus Jones ended up playing 35 minutes, a team high 35 minutes as well. And the efficiency is just so notable. 11 of 19 from the field, 2 of 4 on the three-pointers, 6 assists to 2 turnovers. 2 turnovers is not high to a lot of people. To Tyus Jones, that's probably a pretty high number with the way, his assist to turnover ratio works. But overall, I think after a slow start, and I say slow start because most people probably didn't even pay attention to it, but the Grizzlies started off 0-3 when Ja Morant didn't play his first 3 games. They've won the last 4 games that Tyus Jones has started at point guard. So 7 games so far up to this point in the season with Ja Morant not starting. Now 4-3. So first time over 500 for the Grizzlies. And I want to point out some stats here, because when I tell you these stats, you're going to say, oh, yeah. Remember Tyus Jones signed that 2-year extension before the season started. These stats are going to let you know, yeah, Kenny Chandler might want to go ahead and start getting ready, because these might be the last 2 years we see Tyus Jones in Memphis. But looking at his numbers this season as a starting point guard, check this out. Tyus Jones is averaging over 21 points, 7.7 assists. He has a 132 offensive rating. That means the Grizzlies are scoring close to 132 points per 100 possessions when Tyus Jones starts at point guard. In comparison, when he's a reserve, his offensive rating is 120. Defensive rating even goes down from 114 to 110. Total shooting percentage is close to 64% in games he started, 54% shooting from the field, 50% shooting from three-point range. And here's the dandy, 54 assists to 11 turnovers. That's almost a 5-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. So Tyus Jones, when he starts, he is putting up, I mean, these are some real good top tier Western Conference point guard numbers. So the Grizzlies are very fortunate to be in that situation. And, having him kind of afford you the opportunity to say, hey, Ja, you don't have to rush back. Take your time, especially when you're playing, no disrespect to the Spurs, but, one of the weaker teams in the Western Conference. You're able to throw out a guy like Tyus Jones and have, success. But getting back to the Tyus Jones and Trey Jones narrative here, just after the game, Tyus Jones, talked about how he doesn't take this for granted. And it's unique, how many times, we in Memphis, we saw kind of the passing of the torch from Pau Gasol to Marc Gasol and to us. I mean, to me at least, that was pretty unique. Seeing one guy come in, number one overall pick, and then Marc Gasol eventually in a trade with his brother, albeit, comes in and becomes, the next one of the big franchise players for the Grizzlies. So the Gasol brothers are probably the closest case to what Memphis people can relate to what the Jones family is doing in the NBA right now. But Trey Jones, again, solid night for him as well. I might as well point out the fact that, Kenny Chandler, as the backup point guard now, is getting a lot more run, and his stats haven't been, pretty notable in any obvious way. I think overall in this game, he didn't have his greatest performance. 2 points, 4 assists in 13 minutes. He was one of two guys who came off the bench who had a negative plus minus. I think he was -6 in this game as well. But that was more with that second unit that the Grizzlies like to run out there. Again, the Grizzlies have a bench, but they have 2 units that they like to run. And that second unit usually contains Kennedy Chandler, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. are the 2 starters that usually run with those guys. And then it's usually Xavier Tillman and then one of the other wing players. Sometimes I think it's Zaire Williams. But in this case, 4 of the guys that I just mentioned all finished with negative ratio plus minus. So it's not Kenny Chandler was in the game. He slowed things down or anything like that. Xavier Tillman as well, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. all finished in the negatives against the Spurs. But those players pretty much all had good games, I think. In particular, we're going to talk about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s defensive effort. We're going to talk about Desmond Bane kind of getting his explosiveness back. And I don't want to say I told you so. I don't want to say I told you so when it comes to Zaire Williams, but he's peaking right now. Not peaking in the sense of this is the best he's going to play, but peaking in the sense of this is the best he has played. We're going to talk about all those guys coming up after the break. But before we get to that, we got to talk to you about Bet Online. Bet Online is where you get the latest odds, the latest news, the latest scores. Bet Online is where you can go listen to some podcasts, sports podcasts as well. Bet Online is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Again, you go get the latest odds. You can go get the trends for all the professional, even the amateur leagues out there, from pro football, college football, college basketball, everything. We got it all covered at betonline.net. Again, even if you love sports podcasts, you can go find those at BetOnline as well. Remember, BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head over to the website now, or you can use your mobile device to learn more. So the website is betonline.net, or you can use your mobile device to go to BetOnline, because BetOnline is where the game starts. The game starts for the Grizzlies, and it started with a different looking lineup, right? No Ja Morant. So Tyus Jones steps in. But the difference between Ja Morant and Tyus Jones goes much beyond just, hey, their personal playing styles. There is a team difference in terms of how the team plays when these two guys are in the starting lineup. In particular, in this game, right, against the Spurs, I'm noticing the ball movement. And before you look up, by the end of the first half, 4 starters on the Grizzlies had multiple assists. And then by the end of the game, check this out. Tyus Jones, 6 assists. Dillon Brooks, 3 assists. Jaren Jackson Jr., 2 assists. Desmond Bane, 4 assists. Steven Adams, 4 assists. The ball is moving when those guys are in the lineup. It's not sticking, as great as Ja Morant has been and is. The Grizzlies will tend to ball watch from time to time. And when he goes in pick and roll, and it's kind of easier to load up and project where the ball is going for defenses when that happens. Hey, if I help off of Ja Morant, my help side defender has to rotate, because if he doesn't rotate, that guy's going to be open. And hey, when he rotates, they're going to swing it to the next guy, and he's going to be open. So defenses kind of got a better indication of who and how to guard when Ja Morant has the ball stuck in his hands from time to time, even though since he's Ja Morant, it's still hard to stop. But the point here is you don't know who to focus on when Ja Morant's out of the lineup. Conventional wisdom says, hey, you know what? Desmond Bane's averaging over 20 points per game. Let's focus on him. Well, congratulations. You held Desmond Bane to 6 of 16 shooting in this game. Now Tyus Jones goes 11 of 19. Jaren Jackson Jr. shoots 5 of 10. Steven Adams 5 of 7, 13 points, 15 rebounds for Steven Adams as well. So congratulations on that. So basically, the totality of what this team can bring to the table, and this was the theme last season. This is nothing new. It's not like I'm talking about something here that most of you haven't heard before, but this is a different season. And again, I mentioned how the Grizzlies started 0-3 without Ja Morant at the start of the season. So now they're 4-3. Things are turning around. And Jaren Jackson Jr., he is now, you go over to Bet Online, he is one of your top favorites for Defensive Player of the Year right now. And he is on an unreal stretch, to say the least. I tried to get it out of Taylor Jenkins. As most of you may know, Taylor Jenkins isn't your big, he's an in-the-moment guy. He's not going to say, wow, this is the best basketball I've seen Jaren Jackson Jr. play. That's not a Taylor Jenkins-like quote. But, I mean, he has to be thinking it. The Grizzlies, his teammates are raving about what Jaren Jackson Jr. is doing right now. And let's put it in perspective here. 6 consecutive games of 3 or more blocks. Jaren Jackson Jr. Right now, I think he's on a stretch of 11 consecutive games with multiple blocks. 11 consecutive games of multiple blocks, 6 games of 3 or more blocks against the Spurs. Oh, ho-hum, just another 5-block game. Back-to-back games with 5 blocks for Jaren Jackson Jr. And it's hard to quantify what he's doing, but a good way to look at it would be Dillon Brooks. I've talked about this time and time again, but Dillon Brooks is literally guarding 7'1" Lauri Markkanen. He's guarding 6'6", 280-pound Zion Williamson. This game he's guarding, Trey Jones. He's guarding whoever the hot hand was for the Spurs. Dillon Brooks says, I got him. And the point of that is, I can't stress this enough. You and I both know Jaren Jackson Jr.'s on-the-ball defense isn't a problem. But on the ball, he is much more susceptible to commit fouls. Dillon Brooks protects Jaren Jackson Jr. from committing as many fouls because Jaren Jackson Jr. as a help defender, or not even just helping on the matchups with Dillon Brooks, it's more so helping the fact that Dillon Brooks allows Jaren Jackson Jr. to guard a weaker offensive player, which allows him to be a more impactful help defender, which allows him to stay out of foul trouble a little bit more because he does a really good job, Jaren Jackson, that is, of staying vertical or just getting all ball. I mean, the guy knows where the ball is going, and that's why he's such an impactful, forceful guy when it comes to protecting the rim. So Jaren Jackson Jr. right now, I mean, in no world is he not the Defensive Player of the Year favorite to me right now. And it's not only him. Again, I think Dillon Brooks is playing all league defense right now. He's going to be first or second team, I think, at this rate. Maybe not first team. Reputation means a lot when it comes to these defensive awards, but we'll see over the course of the season because I'm going to talk about it, and we'll see what happens there. But how about Desmond Bane, right? I know I mentioned the shooting. Not the biggest shooting night for Desmond Bane. I think he was 6 of 15, 6 of 16 in this game. 6 of 16. But you know what he did do? He made 3 of 5 3-pointers. And he looked explosive. Can't stress enough those last 3 words there about Desmond Bane. He looked explosive. On the second night of a back-to-back, mind you. So here's the thing. With Desmond Bane rounding into form, the Grizzlies are getting closer to the team that we think they can be. They're getting much, much closer to that team right now. And here's the thing. Desmond Bane is averaging, over 20 points per game, 3 for 5 3-pointers, and he made arguably the biggest shot in this game for the Grizzlies in the fourth quarter. I think the Grizzlies were up 3 points. Greg Popovich, being the guy, the smart, cerebral guy he is, he kind of, went into the bag of tricks and did this whole, hacker, what do you call it? Hacker Steven Adams. So he hacks Steven Adams. Steven Adams goes to the free throw line, knocks down 1 of 2. It's a 3-point game at this point. So the Spurs kind of trying to regain the momentum after the Grizzlies have taken it. Spurs go back up the court. Dillon Brooks jumps the pass lane, gets the steal, and throws it ahead to Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones throws it to the corner, and we see the flyby. Desmond Bane pump fakes. Defender flies by. He knocks down a big 3-pointer after Steven Adams' free throw. That lead went from a 3-point lead to a 7-point lead, and the Grizzlies never relinquished the lead from that point on. But Desmond Bane, seeing him look more explosive, and quite frankly, he played the second night of a back-to-back and played 29 minutes. And he said it himself, his legs are starting to get back under him. And he's been very honest, I would like to add. Desmond Bane has been very honest throughout this stretch. He said, look, hey, my legs aren't completely under me right now, but now he's saying my legs are starting to get back under me. So you're getting high-level play from Jaren Jackson Jr. You know what Ja's doing. Now, you mentioned Desmond Bane getting closer to his speed. The Grizzlies are entering a wonderful stretch here where they could have their best players playing their best basketball. And quite frankly, you're going to need it with the games coming up ahead. There are no whammies after this upcoming Spurs game on Wednesday. You're talking about going to Indiana, who's a young team, but they're playing really good basketball. Then you have the Suns. Then you go on a 5-game West Coast trip, right? Where you're talking about you go to the Lakers, who are playing much better basketball. You got the Suns in there. You got the Kings. You got the Warriors. And then Minnesota. So big stretch of basketball coming up. It's good to see Desmond Bane get closer. Jaren Jackson Jr. playing at his level. Ja will be back really soon. And there's one more guy I want to point out. I'm going to end it on him because I think it's notable what he's done of late. Remember, I said Ziaire Williams is getting closer. The confidence is there. Now he's just stacking good games on top of good games on top of good games. Another productive performance from Ziaire Williams in this game. 11 points, 5 rebounds, 4 of 9 shooting, plus 4 in 23 minutes of action. 23 minutes of action is notable. That's notable because the Grizzlies, for a latter part of that fourth quarter, again, they tried to go to this hacked Steven Adams thing, and Taylor Jenkins countered by saying, hey, we're just going to put Ziaire Williams into the game. Ziaire Williams was the guy that got in the game over John Conchar, notably. So I think he's getting back in his groove. So, again, we're talking about a stretch now with Ziaire Williams where he's had 16 points, 9 points, and 11 points in his last 3 games. So some good basketball from Ziaire Williams. And this comes after – I want to go to the 4 games before the last 3 games that I mentioned. He was minus 14, minus 27, -3 and -10 in his minutes. Zaire Williams' minutes just weren't good minutes. We're just being honest. They were not good minutes. Since then, +13. He was -5 on the first night of the back-to-back against Utah. +4 in his last game. Zaire Williams has great offensive potential. You saw one of his first baskets against the Spurs when he went to the rim against Josh Richardson, who I think is a really solid one of those upper tier defenders when it comes to wing guys. Got past him, got to the rim, kind of did an acrobatic finish around the rim. So Zaire Williams, what he's doing off the bench, combining with what Tyus Jones, you get Brandon Clarke, who's also averaging double figures back in the next week or so. And we haven't seen the Grizzlies really peak. We've seen the Grizzlies healthy, right? But when they were healthy, that the 4-game stretch or so, remember Desmond Bane was working his way back. Jaren Jackson Jr. had a couple games with foul trouble mixed in there as well. And Zaire Williams, just wasn't giving you good minutes. So now you're talking about the most talented players on the Grizzlies performing well, performing at a high level. And it signals that there could be a good run coming. There is a good run happening right now, 7 consecutive wins. And quite frankly, the test is coming ahead, as I mentioned earlier. So good basketball being played right now from the Grizzlies, and more good basketball should be playing coming up next. But speaking of next, on the next episode, me and my guy Joe, we will be back together, and we're going to talk to you about this upcoming game against the Indiana Pacers. Not the Indiana Pacers. We're going to talk to you about this upcoming game against the San Antonio Spurs. I'm jumping ahead here. We got the Grizzlies had 2 consecutive home games, the rare 2 home games against one opponent against the Spurs. How about that for the Jones family, right? They just get to sit back in Memphis for a few days and enjoy each other. So pretty cool, neat deal there. But 2 games against the San Antonio Spurs. We're going to talk about the second game coming up on the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I also want to thank you for making Locked On your first listen today. Now make your second listen to Game podcast, because every moment, every top performance, every result, Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA and the Western Conference with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. So follow Locked On Game to Game, and it's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcast. Thank you again for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Me and Joe will see you next time, and we'll break down this upcoming matchup against the Spurs and much more. Until next time, thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies.